Well, good morning, everybody. This is Sarah and
Milton.
Here for another episode of Tailgate University. Today, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about fly control. And you're probably thinking, well, it's too early to be thinking about fly control. It's cold and dreary outside. I haven't seen much of a problem yet. And while all of that's true for today, if you think back to a couple of days ago when we hit almost 80 degrees, we were starting to see some flies out and about. And it's never ever too early to start thinking about fly control, because since it is one of the most economically impactful pests that we have to deal with on cattle operations as well as other livestock operations, it is worth taking time to make a plan. Anything that costs cattle producers $1 billion annually is worth taking the time to plan for and make some decisions ahead of time to minimize those impacts on your operation.
That's exactly right, Sarah. You know, lots of times I think we as producers go, well, maybe the flies won't be too bad this year, but you know, whenever you've been in the business as long as a lot of folks have, and you think back over the years, has there ever been a year when flies weren't a problem?
There haven't been on our operation, at least.
Flies are always going to be a problem. They're always going to be here, and we're always going to need to have some type of a plan in place so that whenever we reach that threshold of the number of flies that we need to treat, that we got that treatment program well thought out and go ahead and put it into place. And you know, speaking of programs, the biggest thing I can stress to producers is there is no one fly control method that you can use and be successful all season long. It takes a number of different things put together to be successful.
I like to think of those control methods as tools in a toolbox. You know, you can't fix every problem you have with equipment on your farm with a crescent wrench. Sometimes it takes other tools as well, and the same could be said for fly control. I also would believe, and I think Dad will agree with me here, that an ounce of prevention is probably the best thing we can do. Anything we can do to minimize those fly impacts before they become a problem is going to be important, because that's when we start seeing those health problems. So we could do something like put out an IGR mineral. So what do I mean when I say IGR mineral?
Well, IGR stands for Insect Growth Regulator. And we're not actually killing the fly that consumes that through the manure of the animal. What we're doing is rendering that fly sterile. And by rendering those early flies sterile, you reduce the population greatly. And this is one of those feed-through products, which means that the animal consumes it. It does not go into the animal's system, but is mixed into the manure pat that the flies feed on. So by rendering those first flies in the season sterile, we've already knocked a big hole in our fly population.
Correct. I've heard from a lot of producers, though, that have tried this, and they seemed a little put off by using an IGR mineral because it doesn't control the actual number of flies that are on that animal at that time. That's why it's important to go ahead and start putting out some IGR minerals, since we've already seen a small fly load, to knock that right in the head before it becomes a major issue to deal with. If you wait too long, when the flies become bad later on in the spring and on into the summer, that particular control method is less effective immediately.
Two things that you've got to keep in your mind about IGRs is don't judge your success for at least 2 weeks into the program. And number two, you have to remember that flies can move for up to a mile.
Yep.
So if you share a shade tree with a neighbor, then it would behoove you and the neighbor both to use an IGR, because you're going to get some flies from that neighbor or vice versa. So, you know, talk to your neighbors if you decide to use this, or try to keep your cattle to where they don't share a communal shade tree with other herds that are not treated.
Well, now that you mentioned shade tree, that brings up another preventative method that we could use, and that would be a fly trap. So a lot of people, when they think fly traps, they think of the little sticky tapes that we hang around our house. That's not going to be effective for a livestock producer, and we all know that. But there are some methods that do not use any sort of chemical or other active ingredient that would control our flies. Those fly traps are going to be very simple. So there's two different kinds. One is a barrel, and I've seen it in a 5-gallon bucket. I've seen it in a 55-gallon barrel. No matter the size, the concept is still the same. put 4 holes in the side of the bucket with a PVC pipe sticking just out of the edge of it. Right inside the bucket, there's an elbow that goes down, and the pipe runs down almost to the bottom of the bucket. And what happens is, in that bucket, you're going to put a little bit of water with a little bit of soap in it to act as a surfactant. And then you're going to put something in there that smells absolutely awful. You know, maybe you've got some leftovers in the fridge that have been in there for too long. Maybe you've got a piece of meat that's been in your freezer for too long and it's not good for you anymore. Anything of that sort, anything that's going to stink and smell absolutely awful is going to attract a fly. Put that down in the bucket. Put a lid on top of it that's got a piece of plexiglass or some sort of clear material over the top of it that will allow some light in. And what you'll see happen is those flies will come up to that bucket seeking that stinky smell. They'll fly into those tubes and down, and then they naturally fly back up towards the light and they cannot get out. And what happens when they cannot get out, they fall down in there and they die. That's a pretty good control method, but if you have lots of acreage or you have lots of different spots, you'll need to find a place where the cattle are going to congregate, maybe near a water tank, near a feed bucket, if there's one central shade location, things of that sort. Because that's only going to be effective if it's near cattle a good portion of the day. Okay? The other method is a buffalo fly trap. And some of y'all may have seen this, you may have looked up the video on YouTube, and we'll include those links on our post here so you'll have that for reference. But the buffalo fly trap works in a similar method. It came out of Australia initially because they were seeing lots of resistance to their fly control methods in that part of the world. And as we continue to use our fly control methods, resistance is going to become a problem for us as well. But that buffalo fly trap, it's basically a walk-through system, and it has lots of stiff bristles. Think like car wash bristles for cattle, but there's no water involved. And you can only send one animal through it at a time. They walk through it, and it brushes the flies off of the animal, and it's got clear plastic on the top, just like our fly control barrel or our fly control bucket. And those flies fly straight up to it, and they basically cook to death. And again, just like with the fly control bucket or barrel, you'd want to put that somewhere where the cattle are going to travel through it at least once a day. And you may be thinking, well, my cattle are not going to walk through that. You're going to have to encourage them for the first couple of times. But from the research that we've seen, once that animal realizes, hey, if I walk through this, I get relief from the flies, they're going to do it over and over again, just like they would a back rubber.
Good place to put that is where you have access into a watering system or something like that. Again, use those step-in posts, some electric wire, whatever you need to, and make that the opening that they have to go through, traveling from field to field, traveling to water, whatever. The big thing is to make sure that we're doing all we can on this fly control, and Mother Nature does some too. And I'm sure you've seen those cows that would walk under cedar trees and brush those branches and then run out the other side, and basically that's what they're doing. The unfortunate part is that those flies don't cook to death, so right. You can build your own fly traps, that type of thing, and I think this is just, like you said, Sarah, another tool in the box for us to try to do.
One of those other tools that lots of producers in our area use is fly tags. And that's a very popular one because it minimizes the labor compared to topical sprays and drenches. And that's very important, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind with our fly tags as well as our other chemical controls that we use for fly control. And that is that there are two main types of control that we use. We can use pyrethroid treatments or we can use organophosphate treatments. And the important thing is that we don't intermix those two active ingredients in the same year. Because what happens when you do that is if you have a pyrethroid spray and an organophosphate fly tag, both of those are going to actively kill the susceptible flies to those active ingredients. And what you end up with is the flies that it doesn't kill are resistant to both of those. That population of flies is even harder to kill, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So, pick an active ingredient, make sure your fly tags, your topical sprays, any other methods that you choose are of the same class of chemical, and use that for 2 years, and then rotate out to another one. That will help limit your resistance. Did you have more comments about fly tags?
Well, and with the fly tags, like Sarah said, use those things and use them for at least 2 years or until you see resistance. But keep in mind that switching brands of fly tags does not always switch active ingredients. Be sure you read the label and read the fine print where it says active ingredients. If you're unsure whether that's an organophosphate tag or a pyrethrin type tag, then by all means call your extension agent, talk to them, ask them about those different ingredients. We can provide you lots and lots of information about that. The other thing, Sarah, we depend on fly tags too much, in my opinion. Fly tags are good for about 3 to 4 months. So if we think about it, it's a really, really convenient thing. We run them through the chute, put fly tags in, and then we can forget about them until time to put fly tags in next year. But that's exactly what we don't need to do.
No.
The thing is, if it only works 4 months and we put them in right now at the 1st of April, then basically we've run out of effectiveness sometime between the middle of July and the 1st of August. And we're right in the middle of fly season. So we need to make sure we postpone putting these fly tags in as long as we can, so that it is one of several tools that we're using at the same time during the peak of fly season, which is between mid-July and on through September. So make sure we don't put them in too early, and by all means, when those cows come through the chute in the fall, cut those fly tags out. What we're doing by leaving them in is just creating a super fly that we're not going to be able to kill with any type of chemical. So we don't want to make our problem worse by trying to fix it.
That's exactly right. So we hope today that you have learned a little bit about fly control and why it's important. I firmly believe that anything that costs the cattle industry $1 billion a year annually, whether that's monetary or reduction in milk production, weight gain, grazing efficiency, or health issues like pink eye, it's something that we definitely need to take serious. So with that, we'll post the links with some more information, and if you've got questions, reach out to us.
We'll see you the next time on the Tailgate University.
Bye, guys.